This is Lenny with Revzilla TV, here to talk to you today about the 2014 Harley V-Rod Muscle. You can see that I'm on right now. I was interested in taking this bike out for a spin to find out if a newfangled bike like the V-Rod can be good for a Harley traditionalist like me. Come on, let's find out. I like my Harleys old-timey. I like them air-cooled, I like them single-cam, simple with no horsepower. That's just what a Harley is to me. This bike is not that bike. This thing's liquid-cooled, 11.5-to-1 compression, big power, big brakes, big tires, big everything on this motorcycle. I would categorize the V-Rod very loosely as a Sunday roadster. This is the bike made for a fella who wants to get out there, do 100 miles of riding in great weather, and wants to be throttle happy. Every time you hammer this throttle, this thing is going to put a grin on your face. That's really what the roadster style or the muscle cruiser format is, and this thing delivers in spades. The V-Rod slots in with some other similar competition. Suzuki has the M109R, Yamaha has a VMAX, the Ducati Diavel is arguably the closest competitor to the V-Rod, and this thing also loosely competes against the Triumph Rocket 3. All of those bikes offer something special. Does the V-Rod stack up against them? Well, there are some things I noticed about it, both good and bad. Some of the good things that jumped out at me, as soon as I swung a leg over this, I really appreciated this seat. This thing has no business feeling as good as it does, and this shelf back here really helps with the hard acceleration that the V-Rod is able to provide. One of the other things that jumped out to me after a very short time of riding this was the traction. And that's a little bit more ethereal than something concrete like the seat, but the traction was excellent on this bike in all facets. It was great under braking, it was great under acceleration, and it was great through the corners. Now, there's a couple things I think might contribute to that. One of them is the set of Michelin Scorcher tires on there. Out back, we have a 240 section tire. This thing is super, super wide. I don't have a huge experience with wide tire bikes, but I can't help but feel that this has something to do with the fact that this bike is what I describe as gluey. It simply holds the road. As I said too though, traction is more than just going, it's also stopping. This bike's equipped with ABS, and the ABS works flawlessly as far as I am concerned. I couldn't get the ABS to engage unless I was using what I would call an oh shit stop. And as much as I'd like to think I'm better than a computer, the ABS on this bike modulates way better than my hand pressure ever could. It really would be easy to get in a bad situation and simply lock up the brakes on this bike and know that you're not actually locking them up. You're just jamming down the pedal and the lever, and the bike's computer is going to do the rest of the work for you. As I said earlier, it just sticks to the road. The high point of this bike for me was the mill. This thing cranks out 123 horsepower from a mill that is the same size as your average shovel head. Twice the horsepower out of the same size engine. But you don't want to ride this thing like you're riding your old Dresser FL. This engine's not even awake at 2,500 RPMs. However, from 4,000 clear up to its 9,000 RPM red line, this thing pulls like a freight train. There's power everywhere. I treated this throttle like a light switch. It was either on or it was off, and I was jamming on the brakes. This thing is so much fun to just twist the throttle on and just see what this thing's gonna do. This is the first Harley I've ever unintentionally wheelied. I had a ball with this strictly because of the engine. And on a roadster style bike like this, that needs to be the case. That's why people buy this motorcycle. There are also some things about this thing that I didn't love though. Let's go back to that seat. As much as I loved my section on here, I felt bad for my wife before I even put her on this motorcycle, and I didn't feel better after that happened. The other thing I hate about the passenger setup are these terrible foot pegs. These are stock Sportster items. They're garbage. They don't belong on a $16,000 motorcycle. Harley repeats that mistake by giving me a set up front. I hate these foot pegs for a variety of reasons. Firstly, they're so short. My boots were scraping the ground long before the pegs ever would. The pegs are also in the wrong spot. They're way too far forward. These things need to be slid back in order to make this bike usable and allow you to use your hips to control the motorcycle. Some of the other stuff I didn't dig about it is a little less important, but it still bears mentioning. Instrumentation on here was really weak. This is a very small dash panel. It does offer a lot of information, but it's not in a particularly usable format. The final nit I had to pick with this bike was the headlight. This thing slowed me down way better than any of the brakes on this thing. I found myself right around 5, 6 o'clock hammering the throttle to get where I was going to, because I knew as soon as I lost daylight, I was going to be slowed down to 50 or 60 mile an hour tops on this particular motorcycle, specifically because of this headlight. It's already a bad headlight, but it's particularly egregious on this bike because of how fast it is. This bike is capable of going much more quickly than the headlight is. It's a dangerous situation. I'm not really digging it too much. That having been said, as many nits as I found to pick with this bike, I had a ball in this thing. Let's go for a ride though, and I'll show you where this thing really shines and the spots where it falls on its face. So I'm all suited up. We are actually out on the bike now. And the first thing I want to do every time I'm on top of it is jam the throttle wide open. And you can see that was just me romping on it 1 gear, and I'm well over the speed limit. This thing just has an insane amount of pickup. It's just really fun to ride this puppy. It's a completely tame and benign machine. But once you decide you want to drop a gear, give her a little bit of gas, this thing is more than happy to get up and get rolling. And again, traction isn't bad. If you look here how I'm leaning, this thing is really biting in pretty decently. Now, I'm not flogging it too bad, but I mean, I am doing 60 to 70 miles an hour through the turns, and this thing doesn't really feel like it wants to move anywhere. And it's actually kind of important, considering that foot position I talked about earlier. My feet, as you can see, are like way too far in front of me. I mean, you guys might be able to see my toes bouncing here out of my helmet cam. I could tuck my feet all the way in, but this is super unnatural. Plus, I don't have the ability to move my hips to control this bike very much. My arms are doing a lot of the work, and I really am accustomed to controlling a bike with my lower body. I'm accustomed to making the bike counter steer really south of my belly button, and I have a hard time doing that on this particular motorcycle. So Harley offers a kit. Direct to the mothership itself, you can get a kit to replace these foot controls with a set of legitimate mids. And when I say mids, it's kind of funny. The passenger pegs this, I'm actually on the passenger pegs right now, and I feel like I can control this bike much better right now. I'm really able to move and cut and juke like I expect to be able to. The problem is there's none of the controls up here. I don't have the ability to shift or brake. I have to move my feet back here. So a set of mids for me is just a non-negotiable. So getting back to some of the other bones to pick, you can see here too, looking at this instrumentation, this is, it looks great. I mean, this looks like an art installation. It looks really nice. Problem is it's not super functional. Watch, for instance, as we speed up, just how fast, what speed are we doing here? As we look, if you're looking up at the road and then down at your speedometer, up the road, down at speedometer, as most people tend to do when they are hitting it hard on a bike, you're gonna have a rough time telling about how fast you're going. And again, if you're going 10 over, and then you also have, say, 10 miles an hour worth of error, you're getting into, speeds that are going to be dangerous in terms of your license. So that part I don't really dig. But realistically, it works well for what it is, but if they just made this a little bit bigger, it wouldn't be such a mess. So riding this thing in the city sucks. Riding in the city always sucks. It's kind of funny, working in Philly and living out in the sticks, I get sort of a fair smattering of open country roads, just wide open interstate, and then also crap like this where I'm stuck in traffic. Now, we're working with the camera crew here, so unfortunately lane splitting is not really an option. But this is actually, believe it or not, showcasing one of the V-Rod's strong points. Really, this thing could make a pretty decent commuter. I used it for a week of commuting, and I actually really liked it. I used it all weather, so in the rain, it was great. It did a great job stopping, it did a great job sticking to the road. I didn't have to think too much when I was riding in poor weather, and that is part of the commute. The other thing that's cool about this thing in terms of traffic and what this is showcasing is, again, this thing's ability to stay cool. It's liquid cooled. If this was one of my normal Harleys, I'd have to be pulled over on the side of the road, or I'd have to be running between lanes of traffic. I have the option of waiting in traffic if I want, which is kind of nice. One of the things I thought was interesting about this is that Harley claims a 5-gallon tank on this. It might be 5 gallons, but the only thing I've been able to get in here is right around 3.7, 3.8. I can't get this thing to take 5 gallons, and I've run this thing right down to sailboat fuel. Mileage-wise, I'm getting 34 to 36 on this thing, and I've been flogging the tar out of it. That's actually very close to HD's claimed estimate. All right, let's throw some fuel in this thing. One of the odd parts about this motorcycle is where the fuel tank is located. Before I took off on this, I had to ask somebody who knew a little better than I do, how do I put gas in here? There's no fuel filler cap on this. That's a little confusing. The fuel filler on this bike, believe it or not, is underneath the seat. It's actually pretty convenient. Keeps the weight centralized on the motorcycle. The other nice thing about it too is because this fuel tank's right over here, I don't have to worry about saving my paint. It's not really a huge issue to go ahead and get fuel into this motorcycle. I don't have to worry about fuel eating up my wax job.
So peep this gas price over here if you guys can. I'm trying to pan over it a little bit so you can see it. The reason this fuel's so expensive is because this baby takes high test fuel. That's again because of that 11.5 to 1 compression ratio. They're making big power out of this thing. That means, unfortunately, high test, which means high dollar.
So if I were gonna make one of these bikes my own, some things would have to change. The foot pegs and the controls would have to go. I can't ride this bike aggressively with forwards this far up. Happily, Harley makes a bolt-in kit for the night rod, so if I were gonna grab a V-Rod, it probably would not be the muscle package. I would opt for the night rod, and I'd probably try and weasel that into my bargaining negotiation. I don't think that bike would get off the showroom floor without a set of mids on it. I couldn't deal with it on a personal level. I was able to test a couple sets of slip-ons on here. We used some Bassani's. We also used a set of Vance & Hines on there. For my taste, the Vance & Hines were the clear winner. Didn't sound like a classic Harley, but it was definitely an unmistakably aggressive sound. Again, the headlight, something has to happen there. I would probably upgrade the bulb in this thing to possibly a higher wattage, but definitely a premium bulb. And then I would probably add some auxiliary lighting as well. The lighting on this bike, I would say, is definitely leaving a lot to be desired. Ultimately, I wanted to try the V-Rod out because I wanted to find out if a thoroughly modern steed like the V-Rod could keep a Harley traditionalist happy. The answer to that question is yes, but in a different way than I thought. This thing is an absolute ball to ride. It is fast, it stops great, and it handles fantastically. It is the exact and polar opposite of all of my old Harleys, but it is just as much fun for me to go out and ride. In fact, it's so much fun, I'm heading out for another ride now. I'm Lemmy, and I'm out of here.